all these kind of messes in the city in our way of kind of somehow connecting to it. It is true that the operation of walking can be traced on city maps in such a way as to transcribe their paths and trajectories. So we think, okay, so let's start looking at these movements. But these lines and curves, and remember that we've got a whole section in urbanism here, which is doing pedestrian mapping. You know, give them the GPS, map with areas, move around there and see what this does. So there's a whole school here. What do you say? It is true that the operation of walking on can be traced on city maps in such a way as to transcribe their paths and trajectories. But these lines and curves only refer to the absence of what has passed by. Surveys of routes miss what was, the act itself passing by. The operation of walking, wandering, or window shopping, that is, the activity of passing by, is transformed into points that draw a totalizing and reversible line on the map. So you can actually go backwards. They came from here, they went there, so I think the line becomes static. So we take an action, a lived action, having no idea what was, what drove, instigated, but we make it now science. So we make the line. So once we make a line, you know, the person did this, thus this is the route. Now there's no direction, it's whatever. So we've made this now into an object. Like a square has a very clear boundary and object. So it goes, there's a threat. When you go and you kind of simply look at that and you say, okay, so this is the movement.
Yeah, but it has value because of the numbers.
It has value. He's saying, we're never dismissing what it has. He's just saying here, the surveys of routes miss what was. The act itself passing by. The operation of walking, that is the activity passing by, is transformed into points that draw a totalizing and reversible line. So reversible means that it just becomes like a fixed, static object or data. And the information of how that actually was taking place is completely lost, but we're using a very simplistic way of looking at it to say, not to say that it's good to know that people move here, that's another thing, but it doesn't explain why the movement is taking place here. That's what he's trying to say here. You got to go further. Anybody want to go into this? I mean, it has to do with the identity of place. When I used to say to people, you know, World Trade Center 20 years ago, that's the image. Very simple. If I say to you the word now 9/11, suddenly this number, which was nothing more than just, you know, September 11, becomes a complete new image, a complete new perception. One of my group of students who were working in New Orleans the year after Katrina, I asked them to make me an image with 13 students. I said to you, make me a postcard of New Orleans that you'd like to send to your parents of how you perceive New Orleans. Now, this was an image. This is what they had perceived. I had some students here, like for example, Yu and Jin Qian, 2 Chinese students. I tell you this, and I lie to you not. This is 2006, a year after Katrina. 2 Chinese students in my group from 13. I asked them, who have ever heard of New Orleans? 2 students there had never even heard of New Orleans. Had never even heard of Katrina. Had no relationship or connection whatsoever to this. So for them to make a map on how they perceive New Orleans is kind of difficult. And I was really surprised. Because I can somehow assume that everyone should know. But why should they know? Why, if you're in some city in China, do you need to know anything about New Orleans if you have no relationship with New Orleans? So much going on. I mean, China itself has the whole world in it. All of Europe and America, all together, fit in one place. They have their world. It's called China. So whatever happens on some other place, somewhere else. For me, it was an awakening to not assume that everyone should know these big global events, even though it's a big one. But really, for me, even I thought that I don't have assumptions. I was woken up by this point. But here's the point. This is the This is how they saw it. Then we did our project. That's the next image they made to send to the parents after they had experienced it. So we made a postcard in the beginning. We made a postcard at the end. The third world. Marginality. The third worlds. The third worlds are not only in Africa. This is why he put it in single quotation, the third worlds. It's not developing areas, developing regions, developing countries. It's not Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia. The third worlds are the worlds of these marginalized, often to a certain extent suppressed societies. The real word is the marginalized society. They are not the mainstream. They're the peripheral. And these guys you find in New Orleans, you find them in the Bronx, you find them in Compton, you find them in Rotterdam South, you find them everywhere.
Well, that's also only like based on perception, though. Because if you relate one marginalized society to the other, you know, like one society certainly isn't marginalized anymore.
They're both marginalized to themselves. The marginalization has to do, you know, again, a part-whole relationship. So you're not comparing the parts within the parts, but the parts to the whole.
Mm.
So for them two, they're both marginalized. To each other, I mean, a Turkish person, most individuals aren't too much trying to consider themselves as a marginalized person. That's the emblem that they get when someone is talking about them. Aha, you're not the majority, you're the marginal. Okay, so those many parts. But I don't want to get too much on this sort of on the marginalization. Point is that these third worlds are everywhere. They're in your back door, in your backyard. They're there, very present. So here comes the fun part. Marginality today is today no longer limited to minority groups, but is rather massive and pervasive. This cultural activity of the non-producer of culture, so the Dutch culture is not one that is too much included in the culture of the Turkish and the Moroccan, even though it's about 1.6 million people, or including the Antillean, Bavarian, which is this cultural activity of the non-producer culture, an activity that is unsigned, unreadable, and unsymbolized, remains the only one possible for those who nevertheless buy and pay for the showy products through which product economy articulates itself. Marginality is becoming universal. This is actually literally we started to get into. We got lots and lots and lots and lots. What's called the Greater Randstad area. So not Randstad, including Purmerend and going around. So that's basically that region. 50% of this population is originally not Dutch.
There will be 4.5
But now you're
million.
Yeah.
And you just said 1.6.
I was only talking about the Turkish and Moroccan here.
Mm.
We got about 1.1 million Turkish on my last, I mean that's about 6 years ago, so I'm sure there are quite more now. We've got about 400,000 or 500,000 Turkish, and we've got 400,000 or 500,000 Moroccan. Back then we had about 400,000 Antillean, 400,000 Surinamese, I don't know, 100,000 Sub-Saharan African. You know, these are about 10 years ago, the number that I was at that point in researching. But the point being, all these marginals together have now passed the 50% benchmark.
Yeah, but they're not all marginalized. There's also like...
The marginal in the sense is that they are not the original, they're not that what is. So every single marginal, every single person that is outside the, let's say, the established norm.
Mm-hmm.
So Holland even has gone so far. And even though there are a lot of these people here who are born and raised here, even their parents are born and raised here. But Holland has, of course, the difference between autochtone and allochtone. And do you know what it means to become an autochtone? Do you know what differs these two?
Yeah, you have to be, I think, third generation.
3 generations down the line. So it's not that you're born here. It's not that your kids are born here. It's that their kids are born here. They're the ones that can say, I'm Dutch. I'm an autochtone. But so the thing when you start to question here about integratie and all these other discussions that we started to have in the last 10 years, become interesting because I was like, okay, so who needs to integrate here, guys? You know, if more than half your population is thinking kind of different,
But I'm,
You know, so it's not, but it's not about, so I'm not trying to go one extreme to the next. I'm just opening up a door to say here, we need to become a little bit more sensible. This is also a reason why, what's her name? Maxima, Princess Maxima, wrote this article a year ago, De Nederlander bestaat niet. Because she's trying to say, guys, you know, what is this thing you call the Dutch? You know, we're just kind of this, and Geert Wilders was like, what? That's the Queen's house, they're not supposed to do. So now she's not allowed to say anything anymore. The whole Queen's house is not allowed to say anything. The whole monarchy can't say anything anymore regarding issues because of the attack of Geert Wilders on her paper. So the point is, it's very true. Say, hey, these slightly marginal societies are, you know, they are slowly becoming the majority. And here they have already become, not on Holland scale, just living on Randstad scale here. But I don't want you guys to get too much on these. I'm throwing you every once in a while empirical examples just to give you a little bit more of a grasp of something. Don't hook in too much it. It's a concept which he's trying to show here. Because he's not talking about Amsterdam here or the Randstad. He's talking about the world here. Because of all of our movement, because of the globalization, because of our migration to different areas, we have all of these marginals all over the world. Because it's not the Dutch people in the Dutch space, but the Dutch politics anymore. We've moved. Evelyn's hand came into my area. I do this.
but I think you're confusing marginalized with minority.
I'm not confusing the two. I'm trying to share with you that whether or not you can be a Dutch marginalized as well.
Mm.
You know, because what he's talking here is not about. That's why I said I don't want you guys to hook too much into these examples. I'm giving you an example of how this can be used. It goes much open. This is generic. It's empirical, right? So the Dutch skater, born and raised here, white and blonde hair, is marginalized, right? That's how simple it is. Because they're not given the opportunity to just pick up these kind of things. They get fined if they do certain things wrong. So they're being suppressed, they're being administered. No, go to the skateboard park so you do your thing. Hold on, the city's mine, isn't it? I'm paying taxes. Can't I leave the city? Can't I use the city? Can I be part of the city? Yeah. Can I appropriate it? I mean, you can appropriate that much. But if you go too far, you're going to get a fine. I mean, I don't know what it is within, for example, in a train ride, if you put your foot on the thing, can you get a fine?
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
Unless you put it in newspaper.
Yeah, well, there we go. So
You tried
so at a certain point, people kind of figure out, but people want to sit like that. So the law kind of have to figure it out. So eventually, the practice, the practice of these collection of minority groups, you know.
Yeah, but the beauty, of course,
The
is that
plural, the singular and plural practices. So putting your foot on the table or on the bench in the train. More people doing it, more people. It's just practices of these marginals, but somehow starts to influence also upstairs. So it takes much longer, but it finally does get to the politician and the policy, and then they say, okay, you can do it, put it in newspaper. So the systems are influencing each other, except, and he's just saying here that these suppressed things, these marginalized societies, well, you know, the great thing about them is that they're slowly becoming the majority.
yeah, but once they are, they can have, at least in democracies, they can like change the rules, right?
Yeah. Well, they can change. They can elect in the of.
That depends on a legal.
I mean, a politician that I can get you a politician to come here talk to you about democracy, and he'll completely.
The agreement is that it sucks, but it's the best we have, right?
No, but it's I can get a politician to come here. It's a complete illusion what you understand as democracy. You know, because what you basically do, and I don't want to get into this because I'm actually on this lecture, but the moment you vote, you dismiss your responsibility. Because I made my vote. I mean, I've done my part to Holland. It should be that. I can go back doing what I'm doing. So the whole point is democracy is not in the politics. Democracy is in your action, in you making the city equitable, in you being part of, you know, a democratic decision processing. I mean, I don't want to open up this door on politics and democracy, but all we're trying to get here is the point, is that these marginals, which have always been like the gaps in the system,